Hello and welcome to CineMaine, where we look at films that are connected to Maine, whether they be set in Maine, filmed in Maine, or have any other loose connections to the state of Maine. And today we are looking at the 2004 Fox comedy Welcome to Mooseport. Directed by grumpy old men director Donald Petrie, and starring Manny the Mammoth from Ice Age and the Blind Man from Young Frankenstein. Former U.S. President Monroe Cole moves back to his vacation home in Mooseport following his presidency, while in the midst of a nasty ongoing divorce from his ex-wife Charlotte. After Mooseport's mayor dies, he's approached to run for office in his place, which he ultimately agrees to. After an incident where Monroe asks local veterinarian Sally Manis to have dinner with him, which she also agrees to, her boyfriend, plumber and hardware store owner Handy Harrison, challenges Cole by throwing his hat into the ring in a desperate move to save his dwindling relationship with his girlfriend. What connects this film to Maine is its setting, the fictional town of Mooseport, which is located in Maine. Sadly, it's never quite mentioned which county Mooseport is located in, and the film itself was filmed in Canada, like a lot of movies set in Maine. In this movie's case, it was specifically shot in Ontario, via sound stages in Toronto, and most notably Jackson's Point and Port Perry, with the golfing scene being filmed at the province's own Pheasant Run golf course, which I have to admit does remind me of a lot of the golf courses I've seen in Maine. A lot of people who aren't Maine natives have had a tendency to mistake Maine for Canada, and these locations feel similar enough to Maine that I'm convinced this film would have played a big part in reinforcing that misconception if anyone had bothered to go see it. Nevertheless, there are plenty of little details about Maine that the movie gets right. I can tell in some shots that they did at least get Maine's flag right, and a lot of locations in Mooseport do give off rural Maine vibes. The interior of the hardware store that Handy owns does remind me of some local hardware stores I've been to in Maine, and the veterinarian office of his girlfriend Sally is basically located in an ordinary house. There are doctor's offices in Maine that are like that. My doctor throughout my teenage years had an office located in such a place. And the final debate before Election Day is held in a school gymnasium, which is definitely something that happened in many areas of Maine, I'm sure. I know in most places in Maine, school gymnasiums are often used as polling places on Election Day. And speaking of the election, the town square of Mooseport, where the results of the election are announced at the end of the film, does have a slight resemblance to Bar Harbor's waterfront. And last but not least, Monroe's vacation home definitely reminds me of some of the more expensive looking homes in Maine. In fact, the film's biggest connection to Maine could easily be the plot point of a former president having a vacation home in Maine. I'm reminded of Walker's Point Estate, aka the Bush Compound, which is a summer home that has been a part of the Bush family for many generations, located in Kennebunkport. It even served as a summer White House during George H.W.'s presidency. His son GW also spent time there every so often during his own presidency. Considering that this film was made when he was in office, I feel like the Bushes may have been a partial influence on parts of this film. While I couldn't find any research confirming that to be true, I think it's safe to say that Walker's Point Estate was the inspiration for the summer home in Mooseport. I mean, it's located in Kennebunkport, which also ends with port. In fact, a lot of Maine towns end in port. We've got a lot of ports. On a side note, there were a couple of times when this movie ended up reminding me of Stephen King stories. At one point, Monroe's campaign strategist Burt Langdon tries to get dirt on Handy Harrison, and the best he can find is an article showcasing that he won a pie-eating contest. I would like to point out that he would have lost had Lardass Hogan been there. There's another point in the movie where Handy tries to propose to his girlfriend Sally, but accidentally drops the ring in the storm drain underneath. Personally, if I were writing this movie, Pennywise would show up here and just be all like, "Hey, Handy, you dropped your ring. Do you want it back?" "Yeah, I'm trying to propose to my girlfriend." "Well then, why don't you come down here and get it?" "No thanks, I'm fine. Go torture some random guy's kid." Despite the movie getting plenty of details about Maine right, I feel like those are all incidental. If I can be honest, the movie's portrayal of Maine does feel a bit stereotypical and exaggerated. To the point where it almost feels like Fox wanted to call this LL Bean the movie before being issued a cease and desist. For starters, there are times where, say, there's a lobster drawing in the background. Get it? Because Maine's known for its lobsters. Not to mention that the lobster is red in the drawing. Maine lobsters seem to always be depicted as red in merchandise aimed at tourists, despite the fact that lobsters are usually only red once they've been cooked. The rest of the time they're like a greenish brown. And in rarer instances, that's not even the case. There's also a scene where characters are wearing moose antler hats, which, again, feels like what a tourist in Bar Harbor would think of as Maine. There's literally a store centered around that. Then there's the character's fashion sense. Take Ray Romano's character Handy Harrison, for example. Why is he cosplaying as the brawny paper towel man? Did the producers just look at this and think, oh yeah, that's how the average Mainer dresses, right?
No, that's a stereotype.
Pretty much the only Mooseport local that actually dresses like how I've seen some Mainers dress is June Squibb's character. Aside from that, it just kinda looks like the producers went to LL Bean once for visual research and called it a day. I guess I would have preferred it if the film tried a little harder to aim for more authenticity, but I can honestly get over that. After all, this is a comedy first and foremost. So what I really care about most here is the movie actually funny? Well, it's complicated. So during the first half of the movie, I was finding it really wasn't that funny. Granted, it wasn't terrible or painful to watch, but I was rarely laughing outside of the occasional funny line from either Ray Romano or June Squibb, who was also in a movie set in Maine that I reviewed last year. Boy, wouldn't it be awkward if those two turned out to be the exact same character just years apart. But yeah, the film's premise, to its credit, is very intriguing and sounds like it could lend itself to some clever commentary, but the movie doesn't really do much with it. And I feel like a premise like this requires satire that has a little more bite to it. Something more akin to the likes of Mike Judge or Aaron McGruder, or even Seth MacFarlane. The only instance I can think of during the first half of the film, where the movie made some interesting commentary, is this scene where Monroe and Bert are discussing the idea of a smear campaign against Handy and how it doesn't seem financially feasible, since they would have to spend lots of money on advertising and whatnot. You can tell this was before social media was a thing, because nowadays all someone has to do is say something online, and the word will spread obscenely fast. It's actually a little disturbing. But aside from that, the movie doesn't really have much to say during this part of the film. It's mostly just Monroe and Handy fighting due to Handy's desperation to stop his girlfriend from leaving him. And honestly, it kind of felt to me like their relationship wasn't all that worth saving. The issues start after Handy finishes a plumbing job for Monroe. He tells his girlfriend he made a lot of money on that deal, and she thinks he's gonna propose, but instead he tells her he's finally gonna get a new truck. This noticeably upsets her, considering they've been dating for 6 years by this point. To his credit, he does try to get her to talk about what the issue is, since he genuinely doesn't understand what's bothering her. It's clear that he wants to communicate and work through things with her, but she doesn't even try to give him a chance. She just straight up tells him that if she has to explain what the problem is, that's his fault. And okay, I'm not gonna act like he's perfect. He can be neglectful at times, and there's a scene later on that inspires a panty stunt that really is uncalled for on his end. Yeah, that's crappy of him. But before that incident, he comes across as well-meaning but incredibly dense when it comes to relationships. So I feel like if she did communicate with him in the first place like he was trying to get her to do, well, this wouldn't have even happened in the first place. But no, in her case, if her boyfriend doesn't already know what's going through her mind, then he's already failed. It's a story that has 0 sides to it. It's like a badly written Hallmark movie that's disguising itself as a political comedy. Poorly. Some of the jokes are a little predictable too. For example, on the night of Sally's date with Monroe, Handy stops by and they inevitably argue. She insists they're just having dinner together and it's not a real date, but then Handy asks the bizarre question of why she's wearing black underwear if that's the case. I remember saying to myself, hey, it could be worse, it's not like she isn't wearing underwear, and about 2 minutes later she says the exact same thing. But see, I predicted this punchline 2 minutes in advance, and I was kidding. Which would be fine since this film is supposed to be funny, but that kinda highlights a big problem with this movie. The comedic timing is off. Not to mention that this is already kind of a confusing joke to begin with. Speaking of confusing jokes, there's a bit early on where Monroe heads to Mooseport in an extremely fake-looking airplane. The one from Wayne's World 2 was more convincing, and we were supposed to know that was fake. But anyway, flying next to him is a helicopter carrying a donkey.
I don't get it.
You're probably thinking, man, he really doesn't like this movie, and yeah, I wasn't enjoying it during the first half. At around the point where Monroe's ex-wife comes to Mooseport to torture him for the remainder of the election, it suddenly becomes consistently funnier. Nothing groundbreaking or on the level of Mel Brooks when he's at his best, but I was laughing more consistently throughout the rest of the film, if nothing else. There are still some predictable jokes, like when Charlotte's getting on Monroe's nerves at the hardware store. There's a very Hitchcockian moment that, while the punchline is still predictable, I was laughing harder at. That could be the result of this movie solving its own problem with comedic timing, I guess. Probably the best thing about the film, though, is its cast. I've liked all of these actors in plenty of other projects they've been involved with. In some instances, even being the one good thing in a film that was easily 1,000 times worse than this one. The chemistry between the actors is also very believable. Despite my issues, I do buy Ray Romano and Maura Tierney as a couple that's been in a relationship for years that's starting to unravel despite the two of them deeply caring for one another. With Ray being very believable in his desperation to save the relationship, and Maura being very believable in her very over-it outlook. Even though it does feel like she's being a little bit typecast here. I also definitely buy Gene Hackman and Christine Baranski as a divorcing couple that just hate each other's guts. A lot of the funniest scenes in this film are when these two are interacting with each other. You really buy Monroe's intense resentment towards his ex-wife Charlotte and that she just gets on his every last nerve. And you can tell that she herself is definitely relishing making his life a living hell with every chance that she gets. To the point where she'll compliment other characters in the film whenever they do the same. That's pretty funny. And last but most importantly, I even buy Ray and Gene as two guys competing for something who get themselves into quite the childish pissing contest, yet do still end up becoming decent friends with each other by the end. Probably the funniest scene in the whole movie involves them at the final debate before the election. Initially, one guy decides beforehand that he's gonna say he'll vote for the other guy, thinking that if he says this, it'll make him look like a stand-up guy, leading to more votes for him. But before he gets the chance to say this, his opponent ends up saying the exact same thing, which he really didn't anticipate. But he leans into it anyway, and the crowd cheers big time. It's actually quite nice. At first. As soon as they get backstage, they just get so at each other's throats that they straight up fight each other, which inevitably breaks onto the stage while everyone is still at the event. Had the rest of the movie had this same energy, I would probably love it. These are some major It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia vibes right here. The music choice in the next scene is very funny too. This leads to a pretty interesting climax. It turns out one of the candidates, I won't say who, was lying at the final debate and voted for himself after all. So when it's announced the next day that this candidate won the election just by one more vote, he feels guilty and admits to lying, even accepting defeat, believing the other person won fair and square. To which the other person then responds by saying that he also lied and voted for himself.
Just remember, it's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Merry Christmas.
It's not Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah.
Once again, I feel like current events at the time may have inspired the screenwriting process a little bit. This was early 2004, so at the time the most recent presidential election had results that were so close that Florida did numerous recounts. There's a funny South Park episode from that same time that does a great job spoofing the event with a kindergarten class that's trying to elect a new class president. Whereas that episode comments on the event more directly, this film just kind of feels like the script was mildly influenced by it. With that said, I do like how everything turns out by the end. It's not very realistic, but it's nice to see anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. I guess if I were to rate this film as a whole, I'd say that it's fine. It's not a cinematic masterpiece, it's not one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, it's just okay. I guess if you're looking for a film that really takes advantage of a premise like this while adding a lot of clever and interesting commentary in the process, this movie might not be for you. And if you're a Mainer who's looking for a comedy set in Maine that really captures the Maine experience, this movie might actually get on your nerves a little bit. It feels like well, not even the exaggerated Maine we sell to tourists. It's more like diet Maine, if anything, really. But if you're just looking for a movie that's funny and aren't picky, this movie will more than likely satisfy you eventually. It just might take a bit to get to the best parts. Though if I were to personally recommend a comedy that features Gene Hackman playing a politician while also featuring Christine Baranski in a supporting role, that film would be The Birdcage. That movie is a lot funnier and has a lot more interesting things to say too in comparison. But if you're a diehard fan of Gene Hackman or Ray Romano, and are more patient when it comes to when the laughs arrive, then I'd say a trip to Mooseport is definitely a visit that's pleasant enough. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for more vids, along with some shorts every now and then. And be sure to check out CineMaine's website, and be on the lookout for future CineMaine content.